over the last few months, I have been researching on the server versus serverless paradigm. So today, I'll maybe summarize a little bit of what I found and a little bit of my personal experience in these, so that you can also maybe get some insight into this. So I was sort of looking for a remote database. Now there are two options I have here. One is that I could use a server, like take a VPS or something of that sort, spin up a EC2 instance, set up Docker on it, or whichever, somehow install the database on it. The server will always be up, and I would have to pay that fixed amount for the server, and as my things increase in demand increases on the server, I would have to scale it up and scale it down or whatever. That's one setup. Second is something called serverless. So serverless is a paradigm wherein whenever the database is required, it would be spun up for that a short period of time. It would finish its wherever API calls come, it will fulfill those requests, and after some time of inactivity, it would get turned off on its own. So I thought, okay, these two are interesting things. When should what be used? So let's first understand that when you have a server, what is the approaches you can install? I'm sure if you see different, when you download any software on the internet, it will tell you do you want to download it for Linux? Do you want to download it for Windows? Do you want to download it for Mac? If you want in Mac, this is for Intel chip, this is a different file to download. This is for the other silicon chips, this is the download. So these are different ways to directly install on the operating system. So based on the OS you're downloading it on, you would have a different extension and you install it and it will install on the bare metal software. The other approach is that you don't care about the underlying OS, you just use Docker for that virtualization so that you can have the setup which is consistent across all the OSs, and that abstraction layer is handled by Docker. So that is the most suitable way of doing it, but these two approaches can be done. The next approach is like using a serverless paradigm. Like I told you, it would spin up when you need and then use it, and then after some time of inactivity, it would go down. Now, what are the pros and cons of this approach? So if you see the pros in a server, in the case of having a dedicated server, one thing is you can add more customizations, and everything you have to do yourself basically. The more control you have, that let's say you can specify some configurations of your server, you can modify things and do anything you want on the server to try and see which improves your performance and different parameters. One more thing is that the server is always on, right? So you sort of get better latency because you get lower latency because it's always up. There's no spin up time or booting time. That's where the con of this thing lies. If you are building something very early stage, which doesn't have any traffic, you're unnecessarily paying for the machine being all the time. That comes at the cost of better performance, but that is something you need to think of. One more thing is, like, say you need to upgrade some version of something or security patches and all these things, right? You have to do all of this yourself. And like I said here, the fixed cost is regardless of the usage, because for the system to be up, that's the cost is what you're going to be paying for. So in the case of serverless, what happens is the scalability is handled by the provider of this serverless database. So for example, I was using Neon DB. So this is my DB's usage, if you see from all these times. So it spins up and it starts to work. Once it is done and let's say 5 minutes of idle time is there, it gets suspended. So it becomes inactive. So this is a little bit wherein, if there's 5 minutes of inactivity, it would get off after that. Anyway, so like I said, scalability is handled by these people. You don't have to maintain it. They'll handle the maintenance of the DB and all that stuff. You only pay for the usage. So let's say you pay on the number of reads and writes. So the benefit of this is that if you have 0 reads and writes, because let's say a side application, right? Side hobby. So you may not have a lot of people using it. So it doesn't make sense to pay for a dedicated server. For more production-based systems which have a lot of active users and all, it makes sense to have a dedicated server. Whereas for something which is being experimental or MVP stage, it is useful to think of this paradigm so that you keep your costs low, at least until you start having paying users. So the con of this serverless approach is basically you have something called cold start. So it takes some initial time for the machine to come up so that it can process the request. But once the machine is up, the request should get processed rather quickly, at least in case of the DB case. In case of a normal server, the Lambda function also would need some time to warm up and all. So that is about this. Coming to the other thing is that you have lesser control on the machine. So since you don't own the machine, you cannot directly control different aspects of it. So that gives you a little less control. But it is something useful for smaller teams which are doing some MVP and they want to not have to bother about all these things. You just have a server which is ready to go. You pay these people who provide these serverless databases with whatever money so that they can handle this and offload that responsibility from you. And you'll just focus your attention on building the product. So hopefully this gives you some insight into server versus serverless. Perhaps in another video I can go in depth into this NeonDB which I've been using for a few months. Yeah, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, you can perhaps let me know in the comments below. Thank you.